Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Market Update, where we discuss leading financial and economic developments in Europe, Asia, and North America. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. And we begin in North America, not in the US as we usually do, but north of the border. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced sweeping legislation aimed at accelerating major infrastructure projects and removing internal trade barriers in a bold effort to fortify Canada's economy amid escalating US tariffs. Unveiled in recent days, the proposed bill is designed to fast-track nation-building initiatives such as ports, railways, highways, critical mineral mines, oil pipelines, and electricity transmission systems. Under the new framework, government approvals would be limited to 2 years, significantly shortening the regulatory timeline that has long hindered large-scale developments in Canada. Quote, "Canada is a country that used to build big things," end quote, Carney said during a press conference, adding, quote, "When federal agencies have examined a new project, their immediate question has been why. With this bill, we will instead ask ourselves how." End quote. The legislation enables the federal government to identify projects of national interest through consultation with provinces, territories, and indigenous groups. Review processes will shift focus from questioning the need for projects to determining how to implement them effectively. The bill outlines 5 key criteria for determining whether a project qualifies as being in the national interest: strengthening Canada's autonomy and security, providing economic or social benefits, high likelihood of completion, advancing indigenous interests, and contributing to clean growth and climate goals. A few of these criteria have raised some eyebrows from those concerned that the new process isn't strictly about dollars and cents. The Prime Minister's initiative follows his April election victory on a platform to win the trade war with the US and make Canada the strongest economy in the G7. Whether these sorts of goals are achievable, of course, remain to be seen. A central pillar of that strategy is improving the country's regulatory performance, particularly for resource exports. At a recent meeting with provincial and territorial premiers, Carney discussed potential fast-track candidates, including a possible new oil pipeline linked to green investments. However, experts caution that legislation is only a partial fix. Quote, "This is not going to unleash the Canadian resource sector," end quote, said Heather Exnell-Perez of the MacDonald Institute, noting dozens of private sector projects already in limbo under existing regulation. Beyond infrastructure, the bill also seeks to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers and improve labour mobility. Federal rules will override provincial ones in trade conflicts, though provincial standards will generally be recognized. Additionally, workers will be able to take federal jobs with only a provincial license, and all federal exemptions to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement will end by the 1st of July. Next up, we move to Asia. American companies are lobbying Washington to reduce tariffs on Vietnamese goods, warning that steep duties threaten the very supply chain strategy the US has championed to reduce dependence on China. Push comes as a 90-day pause on a 46% tariff imposed in April draws to a close on the 9th of July, with trade talks between the US and Vietnam entering a critical phase. Vietnam has become central to the so-called China Plus One strategy that many multinationals adopted in the wake of President Donald Trump's first term trade war. Companies like Apple, Nike, and Intel have significantly expanded their footprint in Vietnam, which now ranks as the US's third largest trade surplus partner after China and Mexico. Last year, Vietnam's surplus with the United States exceeded $125 billion. However, the rapid growth has drawn scrutiny from US officials who allege that some of Vietnam's exports are in fact Chinese goods rerouted to evade American tariffs. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick recently accused Vietnam of acting as a, quote, "pathway of China to us," end quote, referencing a $90 billion Chinese import footprint. Quote, "They mark it up and send it to us," end quote, he said during a Senate hearing. The American Chamber of Commerce in Hanoi, representing firms like Apple and Nike, warned in a letter that retaliatory tariffs could undermine US strategic goals in Southeast Asia. Quote, "Vietnam has emerged as a valued partner of the United States in the context of diversifying supply chains," end quote, it wrote, arguing that the trade imbalance reflects the success of Trump-era reshoring efforts. Businesses are urging Washington to resolve concerns through cooperation such as increased customs coordination to combat illegal transshipment. AmCham also called on Hanoi to fast-track purchases of US goods, including Boeing aircraft, LNG, and power sector technology, and to liberalize its energy sector to spur American investment. Failure to ease tariffs could disrupt key supply chain. Nike, which produces half of its shoes in Vietnam, may raise prices. Apple is projected to manufacture 2/3 of its AirPods there by year's end. With negotiations ongoing, Vietnam has sought to demonstrate goodwill. Officials have promised reforms and high-profile gestures, including approving a Trump Organization golf project and welcoming Eric Trump to talks on a new Trump Tower. Moves which have caused some political controversy back in the US. Still, unless Hanoi convinces Washington of its commitment to crack down on transshipment and expand US market access, the looming tariff reimposition could derail bilateral commercial ties. We're certainly living in interesting times. If you want to be on top of the biggest developments in markets around the world through grounded and sober analysis, consider subscribing to Market Update, hit the bell notification icon and you will be. And if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And finally for today, we move to Europe. A referendum in Italy aimed at easing the path to citizenship for immigrants has failed due to low voter turnout, dealing a blow to reformers and reinforcing the political dominance of the country's right-wing coalition. Just 30% of eligible voters participated, far short of the 50% threshold required for the referendum to be binding, according to the Ministry of the Interior. The vote, held this week, backed by left-wing parties and advocacy groups, proposed reducing the residency requirement for non-EU nationals from 10 to 5 years, potentially opening a path to citizenship for 2.5 million migrants. Of those who did cast ballots, more than 65% supported the measure. But once again, this is only of the 30% that voted. However, Prime Minister Meloni and her allies urged voters to boycott the vote, with Meloni herself appearing at the polls but refusing to vote. The measure also included proposals to strengthen labour rights, including protections for temporary workers and against unjust dismissals. These two failed due to the insufficient turnout. Critics accuse the government of orchestrating a deliberate information blackout. At least state broadcaster Rai and major newspapers gave the referendum minimal coverage. Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini responded to the failed vote by vowing to further tighten citizenship laws. Quote, "Citizenship is not a gift," end quote, he said, promising tougher residency and integration requirements. This vote outcome is just part of a wider European backlash against years of large-scale immigration from non-EU states, with an increasingly large portion of the population concerned by issues of high numbers and poor integration. And indeed, immigration remains a flashpoint in Italian politics, even as foreign-born children make up 11% of the nation's school population. Analysts noted that the referendum's politicization as a proxy vote on Meloni's leadership further polarized an already contentious debate, but also shows that the general feeling across the population on this question remains conservative. Okay, that is today's episode of Market Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Tuesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.